Thank you for including me as a participant of this virtual conference. My name is Michelle Edwards, and I'm an assistant professor of sociology at Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. And my talk is entitled Front Yards as Community Spaces, an exploratory study of Little Free Library participants. This project is inspired by my experiences during COVID-19 and my new interest in Little Free Libraries, and it's in collaboration with Suman Olney, who has helped a lot on this project thus far. We'll go through background, methods, results, and conclusions next. The Little Free Library Book Exchange has not had a lot of research done on it, and it's a nonprofit organization where people can leave a book, people build these locations, and people can leave a book or take a book. And their main critique is that they fall short of their claims of providing access to books to lower income groups. They tend to be located in more affluent areas. Then, kind of a mismatch between where they're located and where people might need books. And then other people have critiqued them as trying to replace actual public libraries, which they definitely are not proposing to do. And this shows the kind of main reasons that they suggest people get motivated on their website. And the one I'm most interested in is that of building community. So my interest with the Little Free Library Book Exchange is thinking about it as a means for building community. And part of that, as geographers and other social scientists have proposed, part of that is understanding people's connection to the place, which includes both the natural environment as well as sociocultural processes. So it's both kind of the social and the environmental that come together. And they argue that this place attachment can kind of motivate people to cooperate together and to have a greater sense of belonging with their community. Now, in terms of where this happens, my interest with this project is kind of thinking about these spaces that are not quite people's homes and not quite people's workplaces. And so some people have talked about them as third spaces. So the notion that it's, first places are your home, second places are your work, and these are like these other locations where people socialize and create community. Some people have talked about them as soft edges. So again, kind of that space between private and completely public, so kind of a semi-private, semi-public area. And front yards have been one of those areas that people have proposed for building community. So privately owned, but with, quote, huge potential to act as a public space. Okay, so the methods. In my as I became personally interested in Little Free Libraries and went on their website, I noticed that they kept track of where the Little Free Libraries were located. And then they also had some information about them, particularly email addresses for some of the registered Little Free Library hosts. And so I conducted a survey of registered Little Free Library hosts in the state of Texas using Qualtrics. And it was about 10 minutes long. It was a very short survey. You can see here, very recently done survey. And it was just asking people about their experiences with the Little Free Library, about their kind of experiences in their neighborhood. Again, trying to really get at this sense of community attachment and place attachment related to both the Little Free Library and related to COVID-19. So this map on the right is what it looked like, and it's email addresses for people who have registered with the Little Free Library map and have submitted their emails on there. And so again, I only included Texas, and it doesn't include, there are potentially people with unregistered Little Free Library book exchanges and people who have other kinds of exchange boxes but have not provided an email address to this website. And so it looks kind of like this. You click on the little red button and then it shows you the email address and then the location. Well, I started off with 826 email addresses. I figured a good portion of those would not work because, again, people are putting their email addresses online. And so once I finished kind of going through the different ineligible folks, I ended up with 670 email addresses. And so my response rate was 15.67%. Okay, so on to the results. So what I'm going to do with this results section is kind of walk through a number of questions that I was looking at and then show you some information. Now these are very preliminary results. I've done some other analyses as well, but that are a little bit complicated, I think, for going through with this kind of a short presentation. And so if you have more questions or if you're interested, you're always welcome to email me and kind of get more information about this study. So the first research question I was interested in is just trying to better understand who are these registered Little Free Library stewards. Stewards is the name that they give to people who host a Little Free Library. Okay, so one of the things I want to show in terms of the results is how the Little Free Library respondents differed from kind of the average adult Texan. And so one of the ways that you can see that difference is the educational attainment. So for Little Free Library respondents, they tend to have at least a bachelor's degree, if not higher, whereas a much smaller percentage of people within the Texas adult population have at least that bachelor's degree. There's about 88% of the people who responded identify as women within my Little Free Library survey. The state is about 50%, and so again, very different demographics of people that I was people I was surveying. In terms of race and ethnicity, almost 78% of my Little Free Library respondents identified as white. And again, you can see on the right-hand side that the demographics for the state are quite different than that. Little Free Library respondents are also not kind of your average Texan, as you can see here, in terms of their income. With Texas median household income of $60,000 in our Little Free Library respondent groups, a good portion of them came from higher income groups than that. And then you can see in terms of the political party affiliation at the bottom and political ideology that a higher portion of ours identified as liberal than the average Texan, and then again a higher proportion identified as Democrat as compared to what you would expect given the Texas population estimates. So why and how do they participate with the Little Free Library Book Exchange? So in general, kind of some key things I want to point out, almost all of the Little Free Libraries are located outside. Most people only have one Little Free Library, and only about half are at people's homes. Just about half, kind of right on that half mark, are in respondents' front yards. And the other portion are at various places. Kind of an important one that I want to point out is the ones that are at school. So I noticed a number that were at elementary schools, kind of available for kids to be able to take books home to keep. I also asked people about their motivations for participation in the Little Free Library Book Exchange. The biggest one being to promote literacy and reading. And then an interesting one, I did a chi-square analysis to see the relationship between how people felt about increasing access to books for low-income families and whether or not they had a Little Free Library at home. And it was actually folks who had one at a place other than their home that they reported this higher importance of this increasing access to books for lower income families. So that seemed like a bigger issue for people who have a Little Free Library not at their house. So how did Little Free Library stewards think about the place where their Little Free Library is located? So this is where I was trying to think about place attachment. To measure place attachment, I used a number of items that had been used in other surveys before, and they're capturing kind of these 4 different components: place identity, place dependence, sociocultural place meaning, and environmental place meaning. And if you look kind of across the board, you can see that place identity seemed to resonate most, like people had the strongest agreement with that in terms of the place where their Little Free Library is located, followed by the sociocultural place meaning, and then kind of mixed more for place dependence and especially for environmental place meaning. You saw kind of a little bit more diversity in terms of how people responded in terms of their agreement with those 2 items. But especially for the place identity, that seemed to be pretty important for the place where the Little Free Libraries were located. And especially for people with a Little Free Library at home, I found, using a chi-square test, I found that they were more likely to agree that that place means a lot to them than those with a Little Free Library elsewhere. Okay, for the Little Free Library book exchange, I also asked them about the effects that the Little Free Library had on kind of both the social and the environmental aspects of this community attachment. And for this, I felt like it seemed like there was more of a connection. People seemed to respond that there was more of a connection to the kind of the social stuff because of the Little Free Library. Next, I asked people about how COVID-19 impacted their experiences in their neighborhood. And this could be where they had the Little Free Library or not. And people reported that due to COVID-19, they felt they had stronger agreement that they were spending more time outside and that they felt more connected to the natural environment, less so on the social items, the first two. And so you'll notice that this is kind of the opposite of what I found with the questions about how the Little Free Library impacted their sense of community attachment. Now, for people with a Little Free Library at home, they were more likely to agree that they've met more people in their neighborhood due to COVID than those with a Little Free Library elsewhere. That was kind of a unique thing. And lastly, how did people view their front yard spaces? Across the board, whether or not they did these things in their own front yards, the people who responded to the Little Free Library survey were very supportive of people using their front yards for a variety of activities, strangely the least of which was growing food. I also did a chi-square test to see if there was a relationship between people's views on front yards, especially kind of thinking about this notion of them being private versus public in those third spaces, and whether or not they had a Little Free Library at home. And I did find a statistically significant relationship there. So folks with a Little Free Library at home tended to view those front yard spaces as less private, more kind of in between, than people who did not have one at home. So in conclusion, first, registered Little Free Library stewards seem to be motivated by different things. And so for some of the folks, especially those with Little Free Libraries not at home, they were interested in improving access to books for lower-income families. But the ones who had their Little Free Libraries at home, actually for all of them, it was really more about promoting literacy. Respondents also reported high levels of attachment, both in terms of the social and environmental items, to the place where their Little Free Library is located. That place identity seemed to be particularly important for them. And then I saw kind of reverse trends. So respondents seemed to have stronger, kind of higher levels of agreement to the idea that the Little Free Libraries impacted the social sides of their community attachment, so the idea that they're meeting more people in their community, that they feel more connected socially to their community, than the environmental aspects. And then the opposite was true for the COVID-19. So for COVID-19, it seemed like because, again, in the survey, when I asked people, because of COVID-19, did you feel more connected to the environment? Then I saw more people say strongly agree, and then a little bit less so in terms of the social for the impacts of COVID. Most respondents, in terms of those third spaces, the idea of the front yard, kind of focusing in on that, most respondents strongly like the idea of people using their front yards for a variety of activities, both social and environmental. And those with Little Free Libraries at home tended to view their front yards as less private than those with Little Free Libraries in other places. So as a preliminary study, there are a number of things that I'm hoping to do with future research. First off, I only emailed some of the folks who are involved in the Little Free Library project, and there are lots of other kinds of front yard activities and groups that might be potentially interesting to find out their perspectives on some of these issues. I only looked at one state. And lastly, I surveyed people asking how they felt like the Little Free Libraries affected them and how they felt like COVID affected them, rather than doing comparisons with other folks who are not participating in the project or during a different time frame. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.